Terrific and rousing movie, that is. And I'm back here with our co-host for the night, Errol Flynn's daughter, who selected all the films we're showing tonight, Rory Flynn. Rory, is there one particular scene in this movie that resonates with you?
I think there's one scene in the beginning of the film that I just remember kind of stands out. When the photojournalist gets on the plane and he realizes that he's actually never done a jump before. And he turns to my dad and he says, you know, oh my gosh, wonder if my chute doesn't open, right? And he says, well, you'll be the first one on the ground. So those things, I love to hear my dad do things like that. So
now, The Baron of Mulholland is the title of your book that you wrote about him. Where did that title come from, The Baron?
Well, The Baron was what Raoul Walsh used to call him, and Raoul Walsh used to come up to our house a lot. And the reason I remember him, because I was very young, you know, obviously a lot of my memories come from photographs that my grandmother took. But he stood out a lot because he came up with that black patch and we all thought he was a pirate or maybe somebody bad,
right,
bad guy.
Because he had one bad eye.
Yeah. And my dad and him, they'd play cards together, but they'd usually go into his den and they'd talk. They'd talk films, you know, was something he never did with Curtiz. Or it was Raoul Walsh who became a good friend. So we all started calling him the Baron.
What was his life like at Mulholland?
Well, California.
Right.
Probably, you know, the most beautiful, you know, town in those days. It was really traffic-free. But all the stars came up. He put out big buffets. He also had a lot of them in during the war years. Sundays was like an open brunch day. And we kids were sort of seen and not heard. I know in the evenings, when the parties continued into the night, we were hustled in a separate area,
right.
But we could peek over out the windows and see them dancing around the pool where my father had, you know, beautiful everything lit up, and we'd be watching Clark Gable, Cary Grant, you know, all of his friends come up dancing. Janet Leigh was up there all the time. But of course we didn't know who those guys were. All we knew was that they were having a great time. And on one of my mother's birthdays, which I'll never forget, he filled the whole pool filled with gardenias, her favorite flower. And the smell of the house was like, for 3 days, it was just wonderful. He was very romantic, you know, and he was very considerate of his children. I think, I really wish that I could have had more of him, you know. I was 12 when he died, so.
He died very young.
He died very young, and you know, as an adult, I would have really loved to have known my father. But I got the best of him as a child, that's for sure, you know.
Great memories. So moving on, stick around. We have 3 more films chosen by Rory Flynn that are highlights in her father's career. This next film is hands down the one most identified with Errol Flynn. It's in Technicolor. It co-stars Olivia de Havilland with a supporting cast headed by the great Basil Rathbone and Claude Rains.
Tonight on Turner Classic Movies, Errol Flynn and his fellow men in tights swing around in the adventures of Robin Hood. Then Flynn portrays real-life boxer Gentleman Jim. And Errol leads the cavalry in Rocky Mountain.
You're invited